7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. There's a At a certain point of the morning. There's just as the sun rises uh, in the east, it kind of catches my windows, the back windows, the dormer windows, and there's a kind of a cool effect in this corner. You won't really be able to catch it on the camera here, but there's a cool effect in this corner of the light, how the sun shines in, which is really nice. You probably catch it on my glasses there, actually. But yeah, so I've gone with a slightly softer tone when it comes to the ring light in front of me. So hopefully it's okay. It looks okay from here. Um, but I've also gone for the earphones here because it is very warm, as you know. Um, Obviously you'll be listening to this Wednesday, but hopefully it's still warm. But yeah, yesterday I think hit 28 here in Athlone. I think it's supposed to be pretty much the same today. I don't really want to be the one that gives out about it, but people who know me know that I melt in these circumstances. So I did have my little Chill Max fan on the go yesterday. Put a bit of water in the top and let the cold air come out and just cool down my. Even if it's only cooling down my legs, it's quite a nice feeling because in my room the ceilings are quite low, so it can get very very warm. I did go for a run quite early yesterday morning actually, and I left here just before 7. By the time I was coming back, which would have been around maybe 20 past 8 or so, it was really starting to feel, So I've seen, people do go out for runs later, or even in the afternoon, and I do not know how they do it because I was melting coming home, and it was only like just after 8. So there you go. But it was good to get out in it to get some vitamin D before it got too hot for me, and I had to hide and go watch a couple of films instead. But if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel if you are watching this on YouTube, or even if you're not, even if you're just if you're listening to it on Apple or Spotify or whatever your podcast platform of choice is, maybe you could go over to YouTube and just hit subscribe under this video, and it would be very helpful to myself and John just to kind of keep it rolling. Um, what Last week I called the episode "This Is a Low," which is a reference to a Blur song. Obviously, It's Getting Better is a reference to the song by the Beatles called Getting Better. For the nerds who like to know these things, because I like to know these things. So I wanted to let everybody who may want to know what the where the titles came from. So I thought this follow up solo episode, I had a guest, a couple of guests, I should say, lined up. Two lads coming on. And I sent them a message on Friday, yeah, Friday, to ask would it be okay to leave it for a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, to get them on again, because I kind of thought it would be a good idea to maybe close the loop on this, considering I did a solo episode last week. I wanted to kind of follow it up. I thought it necessary to follow up to explain what the story was um, over the past maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Where I was, where I am now, uh, because a couple of people said to me that it was really helpful. The explanation I gave was really helpful to them who didn't know, the extent of maybe a bipolar 2 low, and where you go when you're in it and where you go when you're coming out of it. And I thought it seemed like a good idea, maybe just for you know for people who wanted to know a bit more about it. I wanted to kind of cover it. The guests promise you we'll be back next week, and a special edition next week, to be fair. But I thought it was appropriate to kind of follow it up with that. On my run yesterday, I always have great thinking time on my run, and the way if you hear people talk about depression, and they describe it as a fog, it's kind of in your I should say a kind of a brain fog, a fog in your mind. I was kind of thinking of that kind of metaphor for it, and while I understand the metaphor, I've never really used it myself. I think that the fog metaphor for me doesn't seem fitting to how I feel when I'm in a particular low or a particular bad patch, because when I think of fog, I think of, there is visibility in front of you. It might be quite a good visibility might be 5 meters, but it's a visibility nonetheless. And I always think it didn't really fit my experiences. So I was thinking yesterday, what would, and I started thinking of a blanket, more of a blanket experience. So, sticking a blanket over your head where you can see that it's either light or dark. But that's it. It's there's no visibility otherwise. There's nothing outside of what's in your head, and that heaviness is there. There's no getting away from it, and all those kind of negative thoughts, and even going further. Now, fortunately, there was no suicidal ideation for me on this low, but a few years ago there would have been, and when there is that, like, there's nothing, you can't see anything else, because, like, how could you see something else when it's something that traumatic in your mind? So I thought of it like as a blanket, as a better metaphor for what I experience when I'm going through it. Uh, and then I kind of add, talk, when you are feeling like that, the anxiety increases, and the worry, and the um catastrophizing, that kind of experience that I've talked about before, where everything is a disaster waiting to happen. It's not like, oh, like, for example, just before I start recording, I brought my you can't really see the setup, but the setup's quite tight here. I'd prefer if the microphone was centered to my face, but because of the way I have to turn the computer and I have to turn my chair, it's slightly off, right? So in order, if you're watching this on YouTube, you see my hands come around the mic and go towards the computer like this. But as I was bringing my left hand around, I luckily just clipped the full pint glass of water I have next to me, and it luckily, maybe, an inch or two went out of the top, but it went over my copy book, my lovely notes in front of me, and it went over just over the desk and that. But if I hit that the way I hit it, full force, catastrophizing it in my mind, that's the laptop gone, and then we're in serious trouble. Now, some of you were thinking, and rightly thinking, what are you doing with the pint right next to your laptop? And you know what? I just thought of it there. What am I doing? That's a ridiculous place. That's a ridiculous place to put a pint glass. So yeah, that's really my bad. But going back to the metaphor, the blanket, like, when the anxiety and the depression are one, it's like a tangled blanket that you can't get out of it. Like, the depression is strong, and the anxiety is strong, and you feel like you can't get where you want to go. Um, and as we go along in this episode, I'll point out to you, that without somebody's help, without other people's help, the blanket would have stayed tangled, or at least just, over me. It would have been very difficult to move on, to get to where I am now, in a better place than I certainly was when I recorded the last episode, which I would have been 10 days ago now. I know it came out Wednesday, but I recorded it the Thursday in advance. So there's a good few days in between then and now. And when I listen back to that episode, I can hear it in my voice. I can hear it in the way I express myself, that I'm in that low, and it's a very unpleasant place to be, and it's obviously. But when I listen to it myself, it kind of hurts a little bit to see myself as that kind of person, if you understand. So it's kind of, yeah, it's never good, but obviously, as we go along, as we jump those 10 days from where I was, um, it's been pretty stark, and where I am now is feeling much better. Um, the low was 10 days. I worked out from the start, where, not from the first day was I talked about the irritability and stuff like that. I didn't count that day, but the next day was when it started, and then it went through 10 days until I started to kind of come out of it a bit like that. Somebody asked me in training what the duration of the lows are like, and they can be. There is actually in the DSM-5. There's an explanation for what a medical low is, how long it is. And I think it's considered 72 hours to be the length, for it to be considered a low. So yeah, so if they consider 3 hours, or sorry, 3 days, I should say, to be a low, then um, I've had weeks, maybe 4 or 5 weeks of it. Now, severity is another thing again, and trying to measure that off against the times the length of time you're in a low is quite it's quite hard to do, because the severity is obviously another addition. So when it comes to that one, it was a 10-day low. It was in the middle of it. It was quite severe. It was, like I said, it didn't go as far as something like suicidal ideation, but it certainly was something that was really, really, uh, grinding me down. But it involved a little bit of pushback from me, which I can do now, which I wouldn't have been able to do a few years ago. Before the whole, getting therapy and getting finding the right medication and all those kind of things. So yeah, so it was, I've had ones, like I say, I've had ones 4 or 5 weeks. I've had ones maybe 5 or 6 days. So this one was 10 days. It was relatively short. It feels a lot longer when you're in it. That goes without saying, but it was relatively short. So it's good. I'd hate to have to be a 4 or 5. And I always think, like, and this isn't scientifically correct, by the way. But I always think, when I have a low like this, I think, well, I'm going to get a high next, because, well, that's how that's how the universe balances itself out. It isn't the way it happens. You don't, like, go from low to high in bipolar two. You certainly do with bipolar, you certainly do. But with bipolar two, that's not the case. And I think, like I've said before, I think highs are a lot more difficult to deal with for me than lows, because it's like everything within you is everything that's happening is going against what's happening or what you're thinking in your mind. So, to be over there, to be chatty and just constantly talking and trying to, involve people in conversations and text people and things like that and all that kind of stuff, and you're not being able to settle and all, it's a horrible experience, and it's not because I get them less frequently. I'm less able to deal with them correctly, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. So I do hate them. So I was fortunate it didn't follow up by high. It followed up by a kind of a, a level, where I could just kind of go back to um myself and be able to do things without this added layer of, just chaos in my mind. So it was a welcome return. Um, I just got to drink water, because remember, it is roasting. So another thing that I find interesting was when I went into training on Friday a couple of days ago. And there was a mix up. I have my little area where I go, and I feel, I don't know. It's a part of OCD thing, obviously, as well, but it's a comfort thing, and it's, I know the weights are there and the barbell is there and everything is set up, and I'm always in there early in the morning. I always go in, even though training doesn't start at 10. I go in at about 9, and I put my bottle down and I do some stretches, because, I'm 39, and these things have to be done. And you have to look after yourself as you get older and get some proper stretching in. And I've spoken to people about that before, that it's good to do that, get a proper stretch and do some stretching exercises up and down the floor in there. So that's grand. And I like going in there early anyway, just kind of settling myself. And like sometimes Martin will send me the workout, and I'll write it up on the board, that kind of stuff, make myself useful, basically. So the mix up was I went in, and so we put a mat down for our stretching, and then we put a bottle of water on top of it. And I thought, right, my place is secure here now. Martin says, right, go out for 2 laps at the car park there, nice and easy, just to warm up. I say, grand, now I'm out jogging. And I come back in, and there's a set of keys and a bottle there. And I'm like, I think I said something to Martin. But anyway, there's no way I was going to make a scene about it, because my bottle was hidden behind the behind the pole. So the person who put the keys and the bottle down wouldn't have seen the bottle. That was my mistake, and they arrived late, so whatever. So I went over into the corner, and then I was in the corner. I was thinking, why is it so bloody warm in this corner? It's obvious because it's not near the doors, either door. It's right in the corner, so it's really humid in there because it's very warm now, and it's a big space that we're in Fusion there. And then the bar that's set up, I pick it up and I realize it's all dirty and rusty and all that. And I'm thinking, what's going on with this bloody barbell? Like, but obviously someone had taken down the newer one and replaced it with one of the older ones for some reason. But so I'm wiping this bar and I'm thinking, instead of swapping straight away, which is again, you're in the middle of training, you want to do things quickly. So instead of swapping straight away, I tried to clean the yoke off, and I think I only made it worse. Then I swapped it. Then we were doing these jerk split things. I never know the name of these things. I just know the movement. So it's the toughest. Basically, it's the toughest thing with regards for me anyway. When I'm like lifting weights, it's the most difficult action. So I'm not getting it right, and I'm still putting the weight on, but I feel that I'm just not getting the footing right, which is it's the hardest bloody footing for a big awkward guy with no balance. That's basically what it is. And that's sums up all my body movements. So I'm trying to get this, and I'm getting so pissed off. And my t-shirt is properly sticking to me at this point, and I'm like pulling it off, pulling the shoulders, trying to get it off. And Martin's kind of hovering around, and I think he knows, and he's not coming over to annoy me, and he's just leave me to it, and I'm just in a mood. So as everybody's doing the stretch down, I'm just sitting there because I'm getting ready for the second class. And I'm sitting there, and I know that the next class is a partner workout. So you got to, match off with your partner, and they do 10 squats, you do 10 squats, they do 10. It goes back and forth through all the different, the different activities or movements or whatever you want to call them, different positions. And I'm like, oh, this is the last thing I need in my life at this point, and I'm slipping. That's the thing I feel like I'm slipping, and I'm thinking, don't go down that road again. You literally come out of it a couple of days ago, and now you're starting to really just get yourself wound up and annoyed. And then I was partnered off with Amanda. Now, Amanda, I would have mentioned Amanda on here before. Amanda very kindly had me on talking to her class out in the Moat Business College, um, one of the days. And Amanda's such a nice person. She checked in with me when I was feeling down, and I really appreciate that. Appreciate anyone who did it, but it's a touching thing for me, and it's something that I won't forget. Any single one of those people, I won't forget it. So I'm partnered with Amanda, and we're just like I'm still a bit wound up and a bit pissed off, but I'm kind of thinking, like, get through this, because when it's the partner WOD, you feel a bit more, you can't slack off in a partner WOD. You got to get through it because the person's waiting for you to take their turns. You're going back and forth, and we flew it. We honestly did. We did really well, and it's just the way Amanda is. It's just how she carries herself and how she acts. And I don't really know if she knew I was pissed off or in a mood, but I wasn't by the end of it. So I'd say thank you very much to Amanda for that. Because it was it improved my whole day then, and obviously would improve my day, it improved the next day. So thank you very much to Amanda if you are listening to this, because yeah, you cheered me up that day, which was great. um and saying that, like, with regards to Amanda and everybody else, the reaction to when the podcast came out, obviously it came out Wednesday, 6 days after I recorded it. I was starting to feel much better about myself. But I mean, the messages I talked on the last episode about the messages of support when I said I was going to do an episode about this, about the low that it was in. But the messages I received after the podcast, again, I'm not going to say the people's names, and the reason for that is because um I don't want to forget anyone, because every single message was as important as the one that went before it. But I can't really describe how uplifting they all were. The the text messages, the messages of support face to face in the gym, and the people asking how he was, and even a couple of people asking just to explain the moods a bit more, and explain how they work and how a low works, and that kind of stuff that's what it's about as well. It's about people who may not know what the situation is, may not know what bipolar 2 is, wanting to educate themselves in that, wanting to find out more about it. It's about putting that message out there. I was talking to my mom about it, and she said, like, more people, it's great that more people are hearing it. If more people could hear it, that'd be brilliant. So it's like people being wanting to be educated about it is what it's all about. Because if you educate yourself about it, if you educate your family about it, then it's part of the battle. If somebody down the road, touch wood, it won't happen, but if someone down the road is diagnosed with something like this, it's important that they know exactly what it is they're facing, and the ways that they can deal with it, and the ways that they can help themselves or their family members or their friends, whoever it might be. So, that's just as important. I got a couple of voice messages off people again. It's just it's just good. I got one. I will mention one name. I got one off Tracy, who was on the podcast before, and will be again soon. That's a little spoiler there, but yeah, she will be again soon. But how she talked about it on the voice messages, and yeah, I had a smile on my face listening to it, because it's kind of, she's like obviously cool and sound and all that as well, but the way she described it, and it's the thing she deals with in her profession, regards to anxiety, that she can see, and hear, and in the people, her clients. But she was so nice to send this message to me, and a message of support, and a message of yeah, not, sorry, I should say, a message of support, but not just support, but a message of, you know um a friend checking in on someone who we haven't seen each other a while. We'll have to catch up for tea soon, but that those kind of things were very touching. They were very moving, and they yeah, they made me very happy. They gave me such a boost, especially as I was coming out of it. It was like that kind of last little hit before I got back to my normal salubrious self. Okay, going to read out the advert now. Won't knock that lamp over. Try not to. Fusion Training Center, Monksland, Athlone. A place to train in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, kickboxing, martial arts, and CrossFit. A great atmosphere with experienced coaches and a real sense of community. If you want to join the team, find us on Facebook at Fusion Training Center, or drop in for a chat. Fusion Training Center, train like a warrior. Again, open now. Martins, we're all in there, sweating, very warm. But yeah, it's great. It's great. It's great to be there and socializing and seeing people again. And maybe I wouldn't have had the courage to post about this kind of low if I didn't have those people in there. Who knows? So that's another thing that you get when you are in the low, and I think I was getting a bit of that on Friday, where you start to think, oh, I can do this alone. Yeah, nobody. I don't need anybody else. It's easier alone. I can't, keep people can't be annoying me and all that. And obviously, when I'm out of it, this is the funny thing. Like, it's complete contrast when you're in and out of it. Because when you're, like I said, when you're in it, I can do this alone. I don't need anybody. I can handle all this. I'll just plow through it, and because that is I would say the Irish way, but I don't think it's more than Irish. I think it's more of a universal way of thinking, where you're like, I'll just plow through this and I'll get to the other side. And I think I don't know if everybody has realized it. I think I certainly have realized it, but that's a very unhealthy approach to to the situation. Because you can't. Well, I can't. If you can, good for you. But I definitely cannot do that. Plow through it and think I'm on my own. Sitting there Friday with moody head me after my first session, and just being being kind of my ego being humbled in a way when I was training with Amanda, and realizing like even just one person can help you get through kind of a tough situation. There's something that's weighing you down. So the idea of being able to plow through it alone for me is not a way forward. It's not something that I can do. And once that blanket that I was talking about was lifted off, that all those messages of support and all the chats that I've had in the past 2 or 3 weeks, that actually, this was the one this was the low that I had that kind of most, the experience of that of other people, because I was more open about it. This was I mentioned it. I said I was going to do a podcast episode about it, and people knew the situation. That if you're in your shell or under your blanket or whatever your metaphor is, that's not that's not something that you're able to kind of approach or put yourself in this situation. So when you do realize that you're in the low, and you no, I'm not saying that everybody in a low should go on Instagram, and I wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for the podcast, obviously, but I'm not saying that that's what has to be done. But there is people, and I hope there is people in your life that you can say it to. It doesn't have to be a group, the way I did it, but it certainly can be one person or two people, and they can be your little backing band, um, and be the ones that can tell you, like, this is how it looks to us, and maybe you should do this to help yourself with this. And the best way of looking at it when you're out of the low is what you would do for somebody else, and how you would speak to someone else, and that is really what it's about. Like, what you would do for other people and what you would expect done for you. And then you can go on and push on and have that little support network, and realize that um, there's so much more, than just yourself and plowing it along alone. And, what I learned, through this, apart from that kind of support, is that I am stronger than I give myself credit for. Now I need to remember that when I'm in the next low, and that's the challenge. But now, when you're out of it, I do realize that I am stronger than I give myself credit for, and I can endure the lows and the highs. But I can't do it alone. I can endure them. I can, find things to keep my mind occupied and keep myself busy during them, but I can't do them alone. And I have to remember that too, because if I start thinking I can do them alone, I slip back into the same thing that I always had, that I could plow through them and be like, be tough and resilient and all that. And again, people who know me, say no more. Um, and it's okay to admit, like, those admit to those lows to people that will be supportive, or take it easy with you, and pull back a bit, and not be demanding things of you that in every other day you're more than capable of doing. But they have to give you a break just as well as you have to give you a break. So I admit to feeling like that now, and that's kind of takes a load off, and it's massively important for me. And I was with my buddy Josh. I will have mentioned Josh many times on this podcast. So I was with him the other day. We went into the recovery rooms place again. I was telling you about before, with the cryo bath and the sauna and jacuzzi, and the things that you put in your legs that help with blood flow, I think it is. But I should know that, really, shouldn't I? Should have asked. But I was talking about the experience, or the challenge. What's the best way of putting it? Really, the kind of, you can. We were talking about ego, and we were talking about, like, trying to conquer your own ego, and learning about how the mind tackles different things, and how you can set yourself up to tackle those things. Um, and I'm sure there's more ways than two, but what I kind of mentioned to Josh was, like, there seem to be two ways of doing that that I can see. And one of them was my way, in the sense that I was forced to, uh, you know, uh, kind of deal with the ego and deal with these difficulties because they were put upon me. And Josh's way seemed to be he went out of his way to learn about these things, learn how to do it, like, read up about it and watch, whatever it is, um, watch stuff online about it, all those kind of things that you can do to educate yourself on these things. Um, and it seemed to be we had kind of came to the same conclusion, only through the two different routes. Um, and like the ego is such a thing that we all obviously have an ego, but there's outward egos and there's inward egos. Like there's extroverts and introverts. So I think that with when it comes to my ego, I think the competitive nature thing is not something that was ever in me. So that's removed immediately from the from the situation. But I think the ego is definitely has been controlled a lot more through the lows and the highs and the anxiety and things like that, because um, I think it's very easy to not very easy. That's the wrong way of putting it, because it's not easy to control your ego. But I think it's been helped a lot by that, because it's been every time you get checked, your ego gets checked every so often, like it did in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And for me, you can't then let the ego go, mad once you're outside of that, because then it's like this humbling, almost not even humbling, almost like a beat down. If you let your ego go away from you and then you get in a low, a number of weeks later, it's like a beat down. But where Josh is coming from is a different level of, he controls it through realizing that there's so much more things bigger, external and internal, than the ego, and he's able to put himself, or check that ego through all the knowledge he has gained and looked up and read and whatever. So we were talking about this, and this is where I'll probably wander away from the mental health side of this podcast. But I think we ended up talking about this in relation to fighting, and in relation to Conor McGregor from last weekend. Now, this isn't just a Conor McGregor thing, by the way. This is a kind of a thing that seems to be happening now, and it's happened. Look, it's happened for many many years, but it's just the cases that we've seen at this moment, or the the studies that we could do on some people in this moment is incredible. Because when we talk about Conor McGregor, like, and the kind of the narcissism with regards to how he carries himself and speaks, and the cult, the kind of cult fandom that follows, or I guess cult is a wrong word, because it suggests something different than what I'm trying to put across. Cult is, in the way he has a cult. It's not like a cult following. Like if you talk about a cult film, it generally means that it's a smaller, more kind of off the grid kind of film. So it's never going to have a huge following in a general sense, but it does have a cult following. Conor McGregor's following is more than cult, but it's the kind of fandom. Fandom is probably a better word. The thing about, like, what I've noticed about Conor McGregor recently is and I heard someone actually talk. If you want to address what happens in the octagon, what happens in the cage with Conor McGregor, that there's no excitement there anymore because he's losing. He's only won one fight in 5 years, I think, in the UFC, which is incredible. If any other fighter had won one fight in 5 years in the UFC, they wouldn't be in the UFC anymore. But any other fighter, it doesn't, money is what it boils down to. So the excitement with regards to Conor McGregor is coming from outside the ring and his antics outside the ring. But the reason I bring up the fandom thing is because it seems to me that every time he speaks about falsehoods, things that are absolutely false, there's a camera there that can show you it's false. It reminds me of the whole Donald Trump thing, where the fans are going to believe whatever he says anyway, regardless of the camera or regardless of the evidence that suggests otherwise. And it was the same with Donald Trump. He could say whatever he wanted. He's still saying whatever he wants, and people still believe him. Um, And it just I got to thinking about this ego thing that we had, sorry, we had been speaking about the ego and the ego thing with Conor McGregor after the fight. With his latest fight, he lost with doctor stoppage. He got his leg was broken. Now he was getting beaten in that fight. He lost the round. Um, Conor McGregor, if people don't know, is not a man that's going to come out in the second round and be as good as he was in the first, because he's a fighter who is better in the very, very early rounds, and he goes down. The evidence is there. He tends to kind of go down after that. His cardio is never as strong as the other fighters, and he loses power in that left hand that he has. So he said when he was on the ground, he was, saying some terrible things to Dustin Poirier about killing him, which Poirier took real exception to, because he shouldn't bring that into fighting, which is obviously I agree with. Talking about murdering someone when, people can die in that sport. It's not like ping pong. If you were saying it in ping pong, you'd be like, me, that guy's crazy. But Poirier, McGregor continued to insult Poirier's wife as well, which is just, that's what is kind of his thing now. He did the same to Habib. He had to go Habib's religion, all this kind of stuff. He's lost. When you lose your touch in boxing or in UFC or whatever, MMA, it's pretty apparent in the octagon that that's what's happened. When you're fighting better fighters, are people who are on the up. When you lose your touch when it comes to your trash talk, which McGregor was very good at the start, it was a very, very Irish Dublin thing where we are exceptional at slagging each other off, without being too close to the bone. It's very, it's playful. There's a bit of bite to it, but we don't cross the line. There's lines you don't cross when you're with a bunch of mates or whoever it might be. We all know it. We don't cross those lines. He started crossing those lines. He started, throwing stuff at buses and, as I said, about talking about people's religion, their parents, everything, get under the skin of the opponents, but really starting to lose the run of yourself, really starting to lose that that kind of um trash talk that made you famous, and you just turn into this nasty guy. And when we saw at the end of the fight with Dustin Poirier, he was sitting on the mat with his leg broken, still talking about the wife, still having to go with the wife. Poirier suggested that McGregor must have cracked his leg when he kicked Poirier, and Poirier checked the kick, and then when his foot went back, it snapped. John Kavanagh, McGregor's coach, then came out and said, no, it was when he kicked Poirier's elbow. That's when it must have fractured. And then when you landed back in it, it snapped completely. So then, when McGregor's gone out on the stretcher, which he said Poirier would go on the stretcher, McGregor's gone on the stretcher and he's doing his dance. So I don't know what he was doing. He was doing some sort of a dance thing. And after the fight, he started to say, well, I had some stress fractures in my leg from kicking without shin guards on. We were training without shin guards on. So I straight away thought, why are we training without shin guards on? Now I asked Martin about this, and Martin said that he's heard of fighters, training without shin guards on, and that it's a normal thing. But surely leading up to the fight, in the fight camp, which is 8 to 10 weeks, maybe don't do that. I'm not a fighter. I'm not a coach. I've never done MMA. Don't do that. It seems a bit ridiculous that you leave the option or the chance that this could happen to you. But he said there was stress fractures. So then yesterday, the day before, a UFC physician said there was no stress fractures. So that's what I'm saying to you about the idea of the ego and of fandom coming together to create this narrative that, he had his legs were already like that before the fight. He would have won that fight. He would have won that fight. Believe everything he says, and we have to stop worshiping our heroes as much as we do. Basically, hey, look, everybody hears me talking with the Beatles all the time. John Lennon was a scumbag at times. There's no way getting around it. He hit his first wife. He admits to doing that. He was particularly nasty to certain people. He was a bit of a bully. So do I love John Lennon? as a musician and a songwriter, I absolutely do. But his character is different. If I was to lean in any Beatles way, it would be to George Harrison, who was more about peace and the universal kind of language and talking to everybody as if they're the same and loving life and trying to be. Look, I'm not as spiritual as George Harrison, but I'm saying, would I like his attitude more than John Lennon's? Absolutely. We need to stop putting people on these pedestals. The other reason I brought up the ego thing was because I was watching this document. Like, Conor McGregor's loved by millions and millions of people. Maybe not as many now, but certainly millions and millions of people still love him. I was watching this short documentary about Sonny Liston, right? And Sonny Liston was a guy who he was the 24th of 25 children. Okay, he he doesn't know when he was born. They have the year, but he doesn't know a date or anything like that. He had such a tough upbringing in the cotton fields, and his dad he used to talk about his dad would bring him out in the cotton fields for the day, working in the heat, and then beat him when he got home. This grueling life. He got into boxing. He was sent to prison a few times. This is a black guy growing up in the South as well, by the way. Um, he uh, he was in prison. They used to use him in boxing matches just to beat up prisoners. He gets out of prison. He starts boxing. He goes into the heavyweight division because he's massive. This guy is huge. Like, he's the first kind of super. If you think of super heavyweights, when you think of someone like Mike Tyson, Sonny Liston was the first Mike Tyson, basically. Sonny Liston, I think he won his first world title against Floyd Patterson, but everybody hates Sonny Liston. All white people don't like Liston because he's a big dominating black man. They don't like him. They're immediately put off by the idea in 1960. This was when he won his heavyweight title. They're put off by the idea that this man is holding the belt. When they had Floyd Patterson as the world champion, they had him jumping through hoops for the white people. So now Sonny Liston wasn't like that. He was seen as this scary man, this typical stereotype they had of a black man at the time, and I guess they probably still have now. Some people. Um, so all he wanted was to be loved by people, and that's where I kind of draw the comparison with Conor McGregor, who is loved by people, but turning people against him because of how he's acting and how the ego's gone out of control, and it's not letting him, be a normal person as it was. The money thing is one thing. I know that as well has changed Conor McGregor quite a bit, but Sonny Liston was always looking for that love and admiration that McGregor seems to take for granted now. Sonny Liston was beaten by Muhammad Ali in the first fight that they had, and there was a whole controversy about Sonny Liston's cornerman putting stuff on his gloves to blind Ali, who suggested he was in a couple of rounds, blinded by something on the gloves. Sonny Liston fought again against Ali. There's that famous shot of Ali standing over him, shouting at him, but it's called the phantom punch. Sonny Liston was surrounded by mafia men. Sonny Liston was being used by mafia men at the time as a guy who would go around and beat people up for them. They suggested he took a dive. Some commentators say it was a perfect punch. Ali was standing over him, shouting, "Get up! They won't believe this." So from there, Sonny Liston went on. I think he only lived another 3 years, maybe 4 years. He started taking heroin. He was led around with the mafia. The suggestion then that he died from the overdose, that it wasn't him that had administered it. It was somebody who wanted him dead. He died at 37. Okay, never loved by people. All he wanted was to be loved by people and to be accepted for a great fighter. And these, other fighters who are, up there, like McGregor's the perfect example of it, who's allowed the ego to take over, and he's allowed the hype to completely derail his fighting career, because now he's an advertisement for the UFC. He's an advertisement for his whiskey. I know he sold that, but I think he's still involved with it. But he's an advertisement for the businesses that he's in, rather than anything else. He's not a top contender anymore in the fight world. He's just turned into kind of a mouthpiece, and when he talks about stress fractures of the leg that he had before, and even though that physician came out and said it wasn't, people will still believe it. McGregor, that there was stress fractures there. That's why he lost. He's never really lost a fight. It's always an excuse, something else. You know, he says he beat Khabib in that fight. He got finished in the fourth round, but he could beat him. He got he lost 3-1. He lost 3 rounds to one basically, but he still believes that he beat him. And because he said that, hordes of other people believe it. So if you want to, compare two fighters, one that's loved, uh, you know, all over the world, by Irish people and Americans and everybody else, who's kind of taken that love for granted now, and he's lost the run of himself, and the ego is achieved what it wants to achieve, which is to take over. And Sonny Liston is someone who died. No one cared about him. Nobody loved him. Nobody even knows when he was born. And yeah, it's sad in that sense when you line two people up like that everybody knows or has heard of, and that's how they turn out. It'd be interesting if they swap places to see how Sonny Liston would have dealt with that adoration. Um, but maybe he would have gone on the same route. We will never know. I watched the documentary on YouTube. It was really short, but it was really nice, really a great documentary. Sad as anything, but well put together. And I bought a book, the most recent book that came out about Sonny Liston. So I look forward to reading it and finding out more. I just want to address as well, because the Euros were on last Sunday, and the final, Italy beat England on penalties. I'm not going to say I was cheering for England, because that would be disingenuous of me to suggest that I did want Italy to win. Would it have changed my life if England win? Not really, you know. But there's a history there. There's always been a history there. And to be fair, I actually quite like the Italians. I thought they were the best team in the tournament. I wanted to quickly mention the whole idea of the racism afterwards, which is more important than a bloody game of football. The idea that all we heard in the build up, because we got a lot of English commentary over here, and it's because BBC's there, UTV's there, and all we heard is how Southgate was bringing the country together, and the players were bringing the country together, and they're our heroes, and all this kind of stuff. And then it gets to the final and the penalties, and three young, very young, 19, 20, and 22. I think Marcus Rashford is. He could be 23. Step up to take penalties in a European final, with Europe watching, Europe and beyond watching. They have the courage to step up and say, "I'm going to take a penalty here." I'm going to pick out Bukayo Saka, who, because he's an Arsenal player, and I'm a fan of Arsenal, that a 19-year-old is stepping up to take a penalty. He's never taken a penalty in his professional career. I'm not going to go into the manager shouldn't have had it. Forget about that. The penalty was taken, right? He missed the penalty, but when he's walking up to the penalty spot, he says afterwards, he said it a couple of days ago in an interview he did, that he knew if he missed it, he knew what the racial abuse was going to be like. Now, what part of coming together is that, and 19, like, imagine, what was I doing when I was 19? Like, the only thing I was worried about when I was 19 was getting to work on time, getting paid, and then going for a few pints. That was that was the levels of my responsibility when I was 19. Bukayo Saka took a ball, put it on a penalty spot, 60,000 people plus in a stadium. All of England expects, if you miss, you lose the European Championships. And the ball, he's looking at I can imagine this kid looking at the ball and basically saying, right, if this goes in, we're still in it. I'm kind of a hero because I scored a penalty. I'm not full hero because if I scored, we win. That wouldn't have been the case. But if I miss, I'm going to be racially abused by a certain amount of people. I can't imagine what he's been through, what him and Rashford and Sancho have been through. But I'm not surprised by the disgusting racism and actions of a certain few over in England. It's not just England, by the way. It's everywhere. But this is just a case in point, bringing the country together. Piss off. This kind of there's. obviously me, a white guy, saying that there's no place for it's kind of falling, and it doesn't really matter what I say, but I'm just making the point that a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, 22-year-old racially abused for kicking a football. It's like, Jesus Christ. I hope to head to Dublin the next few weeks to get a start on my swimming in the sea. Because I want to. I think I mentioned I want to start into that before the winter, and get, because I can't even get into my belly button in that cryo bath. So I really have to start with the Irish Sea in the summer. So in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, I'll be able to get up to Dublin, and I get I get a break away from from the norm from Athlone. I haven't been up there, I think, since January of last year. And that's such a long time ago. With all that's gone on, it's a bloody long time ago. But yeah, just to kind of get up there, get a swim in the sea, go for a run out by Dunleary, out by the pier. Just maybe go into the city for a look around, buy a couple of DVDs, just that kind of stuff. Just the difference, we all have our different kind of breaks and holidays that we like, and that's really all mine. All I'm capable of at the moment. But it's a lovely breakaway up to my mum's and just kind of relax. Um, Next up, actually, on the podcast, I'm not going to mention the names, because if I mention names, it'll fall. Someone will pull out, and then I'll have to explain why they pulled out, and I don't want to do that. But what we're having the most subjective quiz of all time. We're having three former guests of the podcast coming on, and one special guest, all lads. I'll explain that in a minute. All lads. And what we're going to do is, what the idea is, I haven't written yet what the idea is. It's the quiz. The answers are based, point scores are based on my subjectivity, objectivity, whatever you want to call it. But it's kind of like the idea, 3 Desert Island Discs, and I will judge those songs out of 1 to 10. 3 Fantasy Dinner Guests, and why, and I will base their answers out of 1 and 10. We'll come to a kind of a bit at the end of the program where I'll throw in a couple of easier ones, just kind of keep it lighter. But the lads will know the questions beforehand, the trickier ones, so they have some time to think about it, and I'll judge it off that. So the reason I mentioned that there's going to be lads, then a few weeks later down the line, we're going to have 4 ladies on who have all been on the podcast before, and we'll ask pretty much the same questions to them. We'll judge it. I'll be, impartial as always. I love all the people coming on, by the way. All 8 people coming on over the 2 episodes. They're all sound. I picked them for a reason. So we can have a bit of crack, a bit of a laugh, not take it too seriously. But what the idea is, if I can make it work, it's very difficult to. They've made it easy for me, but if you can imagine, I'm trying to organize all 5 of us being free at the same time. Some of these people have kids, some of these people have dogs, they all have lives. So I'm trying to. I don't. I can be very flexible when it comes to the times, but trying to organize everybody. They've all said yes, which is amazing. I've not had to go to someone else because someone can't do it. I'm really looking forward to it, because the last 2 episodes have been pretty heavy for the most part, and I want to move away from that now. Then these 2 episodes that I'm talking about aren't going to be mental health at all. They're just going to be having a bit of crack. You'll see my my tastes as well, because you can judge by the scores of who I'm judging it off, what I'm into with the music and their dinner guests and all those kind of things. Sorry to crack my neck on screen, but I'm looking forward to it. That's one. There's I've really got to thank, actually, before I go, really, I really have to thank everybody for allowing these episodes to be out there, and allow and listening to them, I should say. I was asked by one of the girls in CrossFit about if after recording the first one, this is this was after I recorded before, but before it was released, if I found it a therapeutic exercise, the doing that podcast, the last one. And it's funny, like with all talking through it all and all, like the heaviness and things like that. I never thought of it as that, but I certainly have found it therapeutic. I found it, to talk your way through things, even though I'm just looking at myself on the screen. I'm fully aware that there's this, I'm doing this podcast, 77 episodes now. I'm fully aware that there's people listening back to this, and it has been therapeutic. It's got a lot of things off my mind, a lot of things off my chest, allowed me to be a bit freer, to be a bit emotional and kind of vulnerable, which is always very important to be. By the way, you don't have to be tough all the time. That's all. Again, it's like when I talk about the last episode, like it's all right to cry. It's not about a manly thing. It's all right to be vulnerable too, and to come out and talk about these things to people, or talk just to the screen, like I am. But I thank you very much for allowing me to do these, and to feel better. This is it's 5 to 8 on a Sunday morning, and I'm going away from this feeling lighter and kind of buzzed. That not not because I finished and recorded and I didn't make any mistakes, because that's normally what I'm buzzed about, but because not only have I got stuff off my chest, but I've kind of closed the circle on this little episode, and these two together have been hugely important for me. So I'm glad I got it out there, and you're brilliant for all for listening to it and responding to it as you have. Um, so that's it for this week. Obviously, I want to thank John um, for the stuff. Thanks to my mom, my dad, my granddad, Jern Calvin, for being helping me get this together every week. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like I said, we're slowly picking up the numbers there. It's If we can get to 1,000, we can do some live stuff. And I'm not doing live stuff, and we can do it on that. If we're doing live stuff, I'll do it on Facebook or Instagram. Which I've just Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Obviously, we're all on there. The Weekly Wheatley. We are on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts, etc. Yeah, it's getting better, as the song says. I try to put in it's getting better, because in the song, McCartney wrote it, quite a bit of it, and he says it's getting better all the time, and then John Lennon says it can't get much worse, which sums up the two of their outlook on life. But that's why I didn't want to add that in on my Instagram story post, that part of the song, because I didn't want it to be a bit of a downer at the end of it. But yeah, listen, thank you very much for tuning in. Like I said, you've all been brilliant. Look out for next week's episode. 5 faces on screen, 1 mute button. I'm in charge. That's directed at one person alone. All right, take care. Have a good one and enjoy the sun. Bye.